Great. Well, thanks for everyone today for joining today's session. This is a wonderful event, and we're excited to see such a great turnout for a topic that at least the people on this stage think have the potential to become one of the most transformative shifts in technology over the next 20 years and beyond. Just by way of introduction, my name is Sam Lerer. I'm the moderator of today's panel on virtual reality. I'm an investor at General Atlantic, a growth equity firm based here in New York, where I spend time evaluating investments in consumer internet, digital media, marketing services, and software businesses around the world. I'm pleased to introduce our three panelists who are among the world's best as it comes to thought leadership around VR. Let's start with Sylvio. Sylvio Drouin is a VP of Unity Labs, leading Unity Technologies' advanced research efforts, looking 3, 5, and even 10 years down the line, probably more actually. Unity Labs is a multinational team whose work has already resulted in cutting-edge graphics and VR technologies that are demonstrating what developers and consumers alike will be doing in the near future. Sylvio has held a number of CTO roles for the better part of 2 decades, including at Extra Normal, where he transformed the company into one of the most successful 3D storytelling outlets on the web. And he's also advised some of Silicon Valley's top entrepreneurs, including Zynga and Facebook execs, as well as Unity Technologies, driving innovation, core technologies, and product vision. We're also pleased to have Lyman Missimer here from Google. Lyman manages strategic business development and partnerships across all of Google's education products, including Expeditions, Chromebooks, Google Apps for Education, Classroom, and tablets, with Google Play for Education. He works closely with the individual Google product teams, Google sales teams, publishers, and developers to drive product adoption and growth. Lyman will share Google's vision for leveraging VR technology into educational applications. And finally, we have Andrew Feinberg. Andrew has 12 years of global experience in strategy operations, business development, and sales. He's a co-founder and chief operating officer at TimeLooper, an app that enables tourists visiting historic locations to experience events that transpired at those locations firsthand through virtual reality. Prior to starting TimeLooper, Andrew executed the turnaround of Courtroom Connect, a legal media technology company. Andrew has also served as chief strategy officer of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a new financial regulator in Washington, D.C. Andrew holds a BA in history from Middlebury College and an MBA from Harvard Business School. So Lyman, maybe we'll start with you, a question that might have been covered earlier in the day, but it's important to level set for people. Why is 2016 such a special year for VR to take off? VR is not a new concept and it's been around for decades. What's changed this time around?
I'm glad you asked. I would say the main thing is the ubiquity of access. Right now, essentially, every one of us is walking around with a supercomputer in our pocket. Your cell phone. It has more computing power than the first spaceship that went to the moon, all in your pocket. And so that's actually combined with products that Google has, like Google Cardboard, is making VR accessible to everyone. So that combined with better chips, better graphics, you can actually get a pretty immersive VR experience with just a basic piece of cardboard and your cell phone. So that combined with the more social aspect of creating VR experiences, like the rise of 360 video, not just production by media companies, but by consumers as well, it is really spurring this rise into the mainstream, into the consumer level, and also into business.
Got it. And Sylvio, in your day-to-day job, you're working with virtually all the hardware platforms. We hear a lot about Oculus Rift, Gear VR, HoloLens, and a bunch of others that are out there, including overseas, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Talk about a little bit of how each respective hardware player is approaching the market. What are they doing similarly? What are they doing different? Are there core differences in technology that one would be aware of that makes one better, worse, same to the others?
I mean, first I think there's 2 main track. There is the augmented reality track and there is the VR track, and later there's going to be the mixed reality track. Augmented reality started with your phone only. It was not an immersive headset. Valve, so if we go to VR first, Valve is more game-oriented. Facebook, Oculus is more social. They want to make VR very social. And then there is Magic Leap out there, which still don't have a product out, but we know it's going to be kind of impressive. And then there is Microsoft HoloLens, which is more enterprise. And then there is Meta, and there is a variety of Chinese headset, which we don't know exactly where this is going to go, but these are the main player. And then there's Sony. There is Sony PlayStation VR as well.
Got it. One thing we talk about, at least on the investing side a little bit, is we look at technology and how fast they come or go. One of the topics we talk about a lot is upgrade cycles and refresh cycles. So, whether it's your smartphone, getting it once or twice, once every other year, once every year, versus a gaming console that's 5 or 10 year replacement cycle. How do we think about that? How are people thinking about Oculus? Is that the be-all and end-all? Is this the beginning of generation 1 of 10 or 20?
There is so much work to do, and there's so much evolution to happen that, be prepared to see better display and better haptics and better headset a lot over the next coming 3 to 5 years until it's stabilized. But over the next 3 to 5 years is going to change a lot.
Yeah, and I think that what you will see is that will happen, at the early adopter segment of the marketplace. But for most of the people who consume Lyman's products or my products, all of that evolutionary development is almost not relevant. So for people, for the 95% of the market, they're really going to be accessing this product in the short term through mobile products like Samsung Gear VR and Google Cardboard. And then only when, as Sylvio has alluded to, the market begins to stabilize a little bit more, the price comes down, and it becomes just generally more accessible to the marketplace, will I think then this question in some ways be more relevant, because at the early adopter stage of the marketplace, there's always an appetite for the next and the latest and the greatest. I think it's only when you start to talk about mass adoption do upgrade cycles become more relevant.
And that also kind of brings into the importance of having your content be cross-platform as well. Because even Andrew, whose content is actually only works technically in his iPhone app and Android too.
Yep, and Android.
And Android too. He's already working with Google to help repurpose it for Expedition. So I think it's very important for content developers that are working on this type of stuff to make sure that it works across platforms, because those are going to change super quickly.
Yeah, and that's also why we are building it on Unity, because we had our own native application, and we immediately recognized that by building our own native app, we were really limited to what our developers could push out, and we were focused primarily on the mobile use case, so we were focusing on iOS and Android. That left out a massive segment of the early adopter marketplace where our content even looks more majestic. So by moving over to Unity, we can leverage Unity's ability to push out to almost all of these platforms and give us much more adoption earlier on.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
So Sylvio alluded a little bit to virtual reality versus augmented reality, and I think most people in this room are probably at least somewhat familiar with the difference, so we won't cover definitionally one versus the other. But Andrew, maybe a follow-up question for you, at least as you think about your own business. These two technologies seem to exist separately and side by side at the current moment. As we think about this technology developing over long periods of time, we may see convergence. Yeah. How do you see, is that the case? Will they exist separate from one another? And how do you think about that in context of what you're building?
Yeah, when we think about what we try to build at TimeLooper, we try to transform the world around you. And so one of the things that's great about AR, MR, and VR is that what they attempt to do is alter your current perspective, right? That's, at the end of the day, they all try to do it in a different way. And so it really depends for us upon the use case. Virtual reality is a fantastic product because it fully brings you into an environment that is altogether different from what you see. Now that might be something that you experience in photorealism, so it looks and feels like what you see in the present day, but it could also be an entirely different CGI environment, matte painting, 3D modeling, et cetera. And that's an incredibly isolating experience, but that enables us to provide a visual perspective that just doesn't exist anymore. So imagine if you go to the Coliseum today, it would be very difficult for TimeLooper to recreate one of the great battles that occurred inside of the Coliseum 2,500 years ago on top of the current infrastructure. So we have to create a totally different environment. Conversely, AR is an amazing product where we're trying to deliver a time travel moment that happened in a near recent past where the current infrastructure very much exists today as it did back then. And that way, we don't need to fully recreate the environment. The world as you see it today with your smartphone is sufficient. I think that where we are a little bit still uncertain as to the distinction between the more isolating nature of headsets and virtual reality versus the more social and interactive nature of AR. I think that's a question that we as a company struggle with, and I'm more likely to look to people like Sylvio and the leaders in the development community to help us solve that. Got it.
Maybe shifting gears a little bit, because I think we're lucky to have 3 representatives here from different parts of the ecosystem to talk a little bit about just that, which is there's a lot of people in this audience who may be interested in working or learning more about VR, but who have diverse backgrounds that aren't coders or aren't in media or film. So it would be helpful, I guess, Andrew, we'll start with you, but input from all you guys to talk a little bit about how we see the VR ecosystem or value chain and all the different parts that fit into that.
Got it. So if I mean, as far as I see it, if you woke up this morning, you have something to add to the VR ecosystem, right? I mean, the reality is it is so early, and Lyman likes to joke around that, we are the graybeards in the industry, and I think, maybe Sylvio a little bit longer, but Lyman and I have been at this for a combined 2 years. So, I mean, the reality is there's just not a lot there's just not a ton of track record right now, at least in the short term, and therefore, and the market is expanding so rapidly, and there's so much opportunity that we just need talent throughout the the value chain. So whether you're really interested in engineering and the math, then then we're looking at hardware design, software design, headset design, all of that stuff. If you're more into the arts and the creative, I mean, at the end of the day, VR is so amazing because it's about emotional storytelling, right? So, it could be anything from an English major to a history major to an art history major. If you feel like you're looking to bring a story to the fore, we need more content producers inside of the community. And then if you're a traditional business student, I think one of the major unknowns, at least for VR and AR, that we like to talk about is what are the use cases this is going to solve? So we at TimeLooper started from the perspective that we had a pain point and that we were looking for a solution out there in the market. So thinking about VR and AR in terms of what problems are they trying to solve in the marketplace, and then going out there and acquiring the technical solution and the creative solution to solve those problems in the marketplace really mean that virtually anybody with an idea or an appetite to engage in this massive opportunity can certainly plug in.
And thank you. I actually do literally have gray hairs in my beard, so I thank you for calling that out to everyone, Andrew. But in a similar vein, like no, you're good. In a similar vein, I mean, at a company like Google, I mean, this opportunity to work on VR literally landed in my lap just because I happened to be working on the education team. We started developing a product that was in the VR space. So I was actually having this conversation with someone earlier, but the skills you're garnering, and even if you're specializing, you just need to be able to, if you want to be involved in VR, you just need to be able to market those skills. So I was talking to someone who's working in architecture, but there's lots of engineering and analysis and data science that you actually do whenever you're learning architecture that can be applied to different fields. So I majored in anthropology and economics, and now I'm immersed, no pun intended, in this VR world. So it really is just being able to garner those core skills and market those skills to your potential employer if they are in the VR industry.
I think that's as Andrew was saying earlier, the VR is a new storytelling platform, and we don't understand exactly what this storytelling language is. So in order to figure this out, we're going to need people from all sort of discipline. It's not going to be just engineers. It's going to be everybody. And that's where there is a lot of work to do, because right now we're trying to cram linear content into VR headset, and it doesn't really work all the time. We don't know if people are going to spend 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a week, a month, an hour a day. Nobody knows how to create compelling content yet. So in order to actually find a solution to that, we need everybody, I would say.
Yeah, and another topic related, I think, for those with actual gray hair, and maybe some of you in the audience but not on stage, in the investing world, we talk a lot about who's getting disrupted by new types of technologies like VR or AR, what have you. And I think what we've seen, at least in the early part of the evolution of this industry, is that this is not just a startup phenomenon. There's lots of big traditional, whether it's media companies, content companies, going out and trying to figure out how to capitalize on this. Talk a little bit about, and maybe Lyman, we start with you, how are some examples, or just more broadly, how are the traditional juggernauts, I don't think Google's one of them necessarily, but how are some of the bigger traditional companies thinking about participating in this wave of growth or new innovation?
Yeah, I mean, I work with a ton of different content providers and developers, anyone that essentially you can use in the Google platform. And one of those sectors that I work with are the textbook publishers. And since we launched this product, they've literally been knocking down my door to get involved in this. Hutton Mifflin Harcourt is 100 years old, and they are clamoring to get involved in this VR world, and they don't know how to do it. And normally with these older companies, when it comes to new technology and they have to make the partner build or buy decision, usually these guys are buying. but they literally just have no expertise, no idea how to get involved in any of this. And it's crazy to see like Pearson, HMH not want to work with Google because they think Google is actually going to put them out of business in most cases, and then literally knocking on our door the next day asking to collaborate and get involved in this virtual reality phenomenon. So it's pretty crazy to see all these new traditional companies. And the way they want to do it, by the way, is they want to create these virtual experiences that are tied to their textbook content. So that's the nature of our collaboration with them. But it's crazy. I mean, I've talked to like innovative ed tech developers, 100-year-old publishers, NASA. Everyone wants to get involved in this, and it's really refreshing to see, to be honest.
Yeah. And we read a lot about us here in the U.S. Read a lot about funding that's taking place in Silicon Valley, or I guess if you include Magic Leap, Florida. Is this really just a U.S. Silicon Valley thing, or is this a global phenomenon for some of you who've dealt with companies internationally?
I would say that it's three different vectors. There is the technology vector, which is in the Valley. There is the content creation vector, which is in LA a lot. And then there is the consumption vector, which is in China. China is craving for VR content. I just came back from Shanghai, and it's just unbelievable. They want to invest hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to create content in VR. So these are the three different vectors that I see. I don't know exactly where else around the world there could be effort that are on the scale of what we do now in the Valley, but that's what I know.
Got it. I want to make sure everyone on the stage has an opportunity to talk a little about what they're working on specifically, because VR is so broadly applicable to almost every vertical. So I want to highlight a couple of these for the audience to get a better sense. So maybe Lyman, starting with you, talk a little bit about exactly what you're doing within education, and I think we'll segue through the rest of the group here.
Totally. So the concept that we're working on, it's called Expeditions, and the base level concept is virtual field trips. So being able to take your students that your school bus, places your school bus can't go. And one stat we don't like to cite, but that kind of drove our product decisions is that after some research, we found out that almost half the school districts in the U.S. are deciding to cut their field trip budgets. And this is at the same time that other research is coming out that says how important field trips are to the pedagogical process because of how engaging they are. And engagement does things like produce better outcomes and also helps with behavior and reduces suspensions. So engagement is super important. So we're trying to create this engaging experience through VR that can lead into a broader lesson. And we're trying to be very careful about it too, because we kind of can't screw it up. Because we don't want our VR into education foray to go the way of smart boards and just be another complicated tool that teachers can't really figure out how to use, so it just collects dust in the classroom. And we're doing this very carefully in terms of just the way we're still in beta right now, but we've actually already had 500,000 students experience Expeditions just through this pilot program that we've been just going around the country and around the world to thousands of schools, letting teachers and students experience it, and then collecting feedback to inform our product decisions. And it's tough because notoriously any game-changing technology, any technology that quote say ruins our lives, like the television, desktop computer, laptop computer, cell phone. In terms of mass adoption, the education market lags 10 to 15 years behind businesses and consumers because those products were built for businesses and consumers first. So we're trying to take this new technology that hasn't really caught on in business or business or consumer yet, and introduce it into education. And so we're trying to build it exactly for that, removing things like tech prerequisites. So you don't need Wi-Fi to use the product. You don't need a login. But again, we're being very careful. So we haven't even launched the app yet, but the demand we're seeing for it is insane.
Got it. Andrew, why don't you go next? Tell us a little bit about TimeLooper, and I saw the video that was helpful. So maybe dive a little bit deeper into what problem you're trying to solve. How big is this market truly?
The problem that we're trying to solve is that, or the initial problem that we're trying to solve is that when you go on site at historic locations, the reason why you're there, the history is buried in the past. And one day, my co-founder, his wife came home from work. She works at Google with this piece of cardboard that was folded in a funny way, and the light bulb went off, and the rest is history. And so what we're really targeting right now is the top 100 sites around the world. So the top 100 sites around the world attract 1 billion visitors every year. Those 1 billion visitors every year generate over $3 billion in revenue for those sites. And when they go to those sites, 25% of the people who visit get an audio guide, right? And if like those big plastic clunky audio guides are the greatest innovation in tourism in the last 25 years, there's a huge opportunity for somebody to disrupt the marketplace. And therefore, our initial foray was into delivering this content. And so as you saw at Tower Bridge and at other places around London and in New York soon, you will be able to use this content to transform your on-site experience. But what we have learned is that TimeLooper has sort of fallen into this this unique ability to tell stories in 360. One of our co-founders is an award-winning director, and therefore what we have now begun to do is to branch out into storytelling with other partners who are desiring to accelerate traffic to their site. So retailers, airlines, hotel groups, these are all companies that are looking to engage their customers with their brands in an authentic way. And so what we do is we enable them to tell their story authentically, but in a way that activates and moves people through the environment, because all of our content is location locked. And then as we take that content and we create that content, we then look to monetize it in other ways. We know nothing about the education space, nothing at all. And my experiences at field trips growing up were nothing like the field trips that you describe. But we want to enhance the students' ability to go on those field trips. And so repurposing our content for the education space without having to solve for the education space, but in a way that in the future might allow us to monetize that channel, makes Google a great partner. Because we can say to Lyman, here's some content that we think is pretty cool, and he can then turn to us and say, that's interesting, let me see where we can slot it in, and then they go and they take it into this heavily regulated, really complex buying process. So we started at travel and tourism, we've moved into retail and aviation and related businesses, and we're also moving into education, really on the backbone of our ability to tell stories.
Got it. And Sylvio, maybe finishing out with you, I think it's important to understand that Unity in particular and the engine that they're building and all the things they're doing around VR are relevant across almost all verticals, probably all verticals, and it's much different beasts. And I use that word carefully because they are beasts in what they do in virtual reality, and it's not much of a comparison between the other folks that are trying to do the same thing. So give us a sense for exactly what role you're playing, how you work with each one of these other guys on stage to help them build and enable what they're trying to do.
Well, Unity, it's important to state where Unity start as a game engine, and a game engine is what powered the game that you play on your iPhone and PlayStation and Xbox. So we have about 6 million developers that are developing games for mostly mobile and Xbox and PlayStation. And then when VR, a few years ago, when the first DK1 came in, we started to work with Oculus immediately, and now we support every possible VR and AR device out there. So Unity is not just an engine; it's an editor that you download and which makes it easy to start assembling interactive experiences. And I see this, that I'm not just saying games, but I'm saying interactive experiences, because in VR, it brings a whole new bunch of content creator. There is people that create, there is Andrew that create this TimeLooper thing, and then there is Verse that create a VR experience in the Syria camp, and then there is games, and then there is a company in Tokyo that creates this little Pixar movie that you can be immersed in. So the range of experience that can be created is very wide now. So we're working, basically my labs is working at reimagining what is going to be the future of storytelling, advanced graphic, AI, which is going to contribute to make VVR.
Why do you think that in the press so much gets talked about on gaming as sort of the first frontier, if you will, for VR?
Because that's the easiest. That's the easiest. It's the easiest to take a game and try to put it in VR. The problem is that they've tried to do this with many games, and it's not always working. So they need to reimagine what will be a game in the next 3 to 5 years. And the type of game and the structure of a game that you're going to play is going to be, it's not going to be the same as today at all.
And maybe switching gears a little bit for some, I know there's a lot of MBA candidates in the room who come from business backgrounds or are here to learn. a little bit more about the business side of things. This is a market, I think, which we would all observe is extremely well funded, at least by venture capitalists and other large strategics, as we've talked about. I guess the question for you guys on the panel is, where will there be true barriers to entry created? What will truly create a differentiated experience, and who has the highest likelihood of being able to do that?
I mean, on the education side, like I said, I've worked with lots of developers, big and small, and at Google, our team is very lucky to have the marketing dollars and the Google infrastructure behind us. So we can afford to play the kind of the long game with our investments. But for the most part in ed tech, I know for a fact that Excel, the VC firm out in Silicon Valley, their core thesis on K-12 ed tech is that no K-12 ed tech company is worth investing in because it's so hard to monetize the education space, at least in the U.S. So for I guess in the education side, it's like you almost need the marketing dollars and long-term vision of a large company like Google that's willing to experiment and take risks. And Apple's doing something similar. I think Facebook is also starting to dip their toes into the education virtual reality scene. But on the ed tech side, there's very few companies that have come out of the startup world and succeeded in monetizing the K-12 space.
Yeah, I find this to be a really interesting question because I think that you can answer it in two different ways, right? So you can think about it from the perspective of those that actually facilitate the VR infrastructure itself, right? The proper VR industry, the software platforms, the HMDs, even cardboard manufacturers around the world, and mostly in emerging markets. I'm not particularly well suited to answer, what the barriers to entry will be around which of those, which companies in each of those segments of the value chain will win or lose. But, Lyman was just talking. He didn't talk about hardware makers or software makers. He talked about an industry vertical, right? So VR is a tool for each of these other industry verticals as well. So when talking about what will, prevent barriers to entry, it's almost like asking what will prevent barriers to entry in the travel and tourism space. Which company will be the one to redefine how you decide where you're going to go on vacation, like Altspace VR or something like that? Well, potentially it's a first mover advantage, or maybe they'll be able to partner with sites and lock them up to exclusives and then make and raise barriers to entry that way. Or with each individual vertical, each of these verticals has their own unique market dynamics, and the application of VR in each of these verticals is fundamentally different. So I think that, when you're thinking about how do you raise or lower barriers to entry, it's a question about, are you talking about VR in and of itself as a tool across all of these other industries or within all of these industries?
VR ads?
I'm sorry?
Ads in VR?
Yeah, that's right.
And Sylvio, maybe for you, because we talked a lot from these guys about the content side. As a software development tool for people who are building content, how do you win versus your competitors who are trying to create the next best engine? Where are the barriers and where's the path to victory, if you will?
I mean, our goal, because of the fact that VR bring such a diverse array of content creator, more so than actual games on the PlayStation or Xbox. What we're trying to do is to simplify the authoring pipeline. And we have a fundamental concept that basically outline all of the project that we're undertaking, is that creating an interactive experience is about assembling assets, okay? So the smarter we make the asset, every time that we make the asset smarter, we peel one layer of complexity from the authoring pipeline. So in the next 5 years, the assets are gonna be smart enough so that your authoring pipeline will be simple enough to bring a massively more content creator to us, and that's how we win. Because the more people come to create content, the more content is distributed, and the more we are out there.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting segue when we talk about accessibility and how many millions of people can have access to creating content. I think this is something, jumping ahead to probably something that will be covered in detail during Evan's presentation. But we've seen recently across digital media platforms how important video is becoming, and probably more important than video, user-generated video and C2C sharing of video. As we think about the virtual reality landscape, how do you guys see this evolving? How important will user-generated experiences be? Not necessarily the Twitch model of I'm playing in a game and I want you to see my own game, but actually my real-world experience is captured in a 3D setting. I don't know who wants to take that, but.
Yeah. So I think that like one thing that VR does is that it adds multiple dimension of emotion in a story. So to be able to capture, when you capture a video, you capture in 2D and it's already emotional and it's already cool. But when you capture, if you're able to capture the interaction, the three-dimensional interaction of your experience in VR, and you can send this to a friend, and the friend can be in the room and basically watch you like if he or she was there, the emotional impact is it's greater. And I think it's much more, it's going to be very interesting to see how we're going to do this. There is a company already doing this in Seattle, and I have friends who tried it, and apparently it's just amazing. It's a very powerful replayback tool.
And you know, luckily, you know, as opposed to the past, there are the platforms that are already distributed with billions of users that you can actually share this content super easily, like YouTube and Facebook.
And Twitch.
And Twitch, exactly. So, you know, that easy access to VR content from your cell phone, from your pocket, that your friend can just send you, is obviously going to be one of the huge facilitators of this, I think.
And similar on the ability to capture emotion, I think one of the things we've seen in the early technologies is around VR experiences capturing your sense of sight, perhaps sound if you're wearing headphones. How close are we, or is this in the pipeline to see sort of full immersion where you're getting smells and we're getting touch, whether it's haptic feedback or not? How close are we to sort of the total 5 senses captured in a VR experience?
Well, if you go to Universal Studios and go on the Spider-Man ride, you can you can already do that. But you know, that's the whole point of VR, right? Is trying to create that full immersive experience for all 5 senses. Hopefully, that's the goal. But I think, you know, I think I was talking about this with Sylvio before too. It's pretty far. I've seen full suits that were used, like, because, you know, touch is the term is haptic. I've seen full suits that kind of try and create like a gaming experience where you actually feel everything, not pain. But for me, that just seems so far off and so unrealistic in the short term. But that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, the dream is to have like the headset to a factor where it's an implementable lens, and to have chips in your spinal cord, but that's like 100 years away, 50 years away. I would highly recommend for everybody to read the book Ready Player One if you haven't done so yet. This is a great inspiration to all of us right now.
Yeah, it's actually going to be my next question. So maybe, I don't know how many in the audience have read that book, but it's a science fiction book. It's a science fiction book which tells the story of a future society where people plug into a metaverse, I think they call it, and there's anything in that world, anything from its own currency to its own school systems to its own corporations, good and evil, if you will. I guess a question for this group, and we've answered it a little bit, but just to add on to it, how far-fetched is this really as we think about a global community of people leveraging new technology to interact in much more integrated ways?
So on our side, we consider this oasis, as they call it in the book. It's what they call also the metaverse. It's kind of like there's this junction of internet and VR together, which basically says that you're going to spend a part of your life in this VR world, and you're going to have connectable experiences. So as you have URL now and website, you'll go from experience to experience to experience, and to related to what you are doing, you'll be able to be in a virtual bookstore and just tap on the book and fall into another experience that would be the experience, the VR experience of that book. What we're on our side, what we're doing is that we're already building the foundational technology to for the next of you to be able to build that metaverse.
And to piggyback off that, I mean, like what Sylvio should arguably be building is, and why I think you see, you know, companies like Google and Facebook jumping into this so much, is that this virtual reality could very well be the next internet. Yeah. It could be because I mean, you can't really get a good virtual reality experience using like an internet backbone right now. So this very well could be the next platform where we go to access different information. So instead of all this like crumbling infrastructure and fiber optic cables, it's just stuff built on Unity. But
Great.
yeah, no, great. I mean, but for us, it's and one thing that people kind of love about Cardboard, and the reason that I think we've been able to be successful in education is that right now all the cynics are kind of mourning this whole dystopian view, just like the plugged-in experience. But what the teachers love from all the students that have been experienced, like Google Cardboard, this front door into virtual reality, is it's actually an extremely social experience. Because you can jump right out. It's super simple, and the kids are actually interacting, talking about what they're experiencing. Pointing, even though you can't really point at something. But yeah, it's I think the front door to virtual reality, which is going to be Google Cardboard, is great because it's the exact opposite of what everyone fears.
Yeah, I want to sort of pick up on the tension that Lyman just alluded to. So I might be a little bit less sanguine than Sylvio, but I guess that he has to be, a little bit more bullish given that he runs labs at Unity, right? So I think that one of the things that me as a parent and just me generally as a person, one of the things that sort of I have an open question about is not so much how much we should be engaging in this virtual reality world generally, but writ large, how much what is the right balance of electronics generally in our lives? And so, people talk about, with kids, screen time, what is the role of, iPads and Chromebooks and technology in education and how are we engaging, how are students, developing socially, in their early years up through middle school and then as they grow into adulthood, how are people communicating? People communicate differently today than they did 100 years ago. That doesn't mean it's better. It doesn't mean it's worse. It means it's different. And I think that one of the things that I'm just a little bit hesitant about is this desire by some to jump headfirst into this world. I love TimeLooper and I love Expeditions because it's an inherently social platform that allows you to enhance experiences and share moments. And it allows you to see things that you would not otherwise be able to see. And it enhances your it enhances your understanding. Where I become a little bit, more tentative is when you try to fully replace the world that you live in with an inauthentic or an alternative world. And that's going to be a tension that I think plays out here more so than we've seen with other technologies.
Yeah, that's a great segue into two, I think, concluding questions we have for the panelists. I think for the most part, we're all really bullish on how big this opportunity is and how far-reaching it can be. If we're sitting here in 10 years with the same panel and things haven't played out in the way that we're all talking about, I think, to some extreme with the metaverse and to some other extent where you've got millions of people using this, where are we wrong here? Where are the people wrong who are so bullish on this?
I mean, if we're all sitting here in 10 years and we're not all actually just plugged in with a headset and watching this, then clearly something went wrong. But yeah, I don't know. Still,
There is it's as with any powerful technology that bring new form of storytelling. There is a danger. There is always a danger. I mean, are we going to be addicted to that? Like, Steve Jobs notoriously didn't want his kid to spend more than 1 hour a day on the iPhone. Because he knew that it was very addictive. Is it the same here? Are we going to spend too much time there, or is it going to create? Is it going to contribute to the advancement of mankind? We don't know that yet, because we haven't figured out what it means exactly, and it's going to be figured out over the next 3 to 5 years.
Maybe to round this out with one very quick question, because I know we're out of time. For each of you to answer in a very short time frame, in 10 years, how many people will be using virtual reality technology on a daily basis around the world?
In 10 years? Anywhere between 100 million to 1 billion. That's a big range.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't even know how to think about the answer to that question.
It's impossible to say.
And the reason why I can't answer it is because the ideal use cases for this technology have not been identified yet.
Exactly.
And until we figure out how we're going to use it, we can't possibly begin to understand how many people will use it to solve those problems.
I can tell you that right now, there's probably going to be in the next 2 to 3 years about 10 to 15 million people that are going to use high-end of device like the Oculus and Valve. PlayStation has a better chance because there's already a large base of PlayStation established out there, and so they have a better chance to have a headset. And then there is the cardboard, which provide right now still provide, which is still the main device that provides the initial wow moment to everybody. So I'm much more confident in what the cardboard is going to become than the mass adoption of those big headsets right now.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have. I want to thank our panelists again for joining us. They've kindly agreed. There's a 15-minute break, I think, to stand in front of the stage or wherever and answer questions since we didn't have time for Q&A. But thanks again, guys, for coming out. I appreciate it and hope you all
Thank
took
you.
something away from it.
Thank you.